All right, James. So we teased it in the beginning of the episode.
Yes, we did.
We were honored to attend the world premiere of the 30 for 30 featured documentary, The Good, the Bad, the Hungry. This is, we talked about this on our previous episode, so I'm sure a lot of people know. It is a ESPN documentary that is focused on the rivalry of Joey Chestnut and Takeru Kobayashi.
Yep.
And how George Shea and MLE plays into the mix of all that.
Thought it was going to be a little more George-focused, but let's just give a quick shout-out to the director, Nicole Lucas Haimes.
Yes.
Haimes?
I believe it's Haimes, but I don't know for sure.
This is the band Haim all over again. We're doing the same thing over the same letters. No one knows how to say it. Big shout-outs to her and to 30 for 30 and ESPN. And also big shouts to, obviously, someone who listens to our podcast, Bill Simmons, creator of 30 for 30.
Obviously listens to our podcast.
But, yeah, I mean, I jumped in before. We were going to really jump into some of the talking points just to say that big shouts to people telling competitive eating stories. We talked so much about, like, how much people were just interested in talking about food and like how that plays into like that versus like talking about the movie and like making movies. And we tell a lot of sort of silly stories, but this was a at times very serious competitive eating story, but just awesome that someone wants to tell a competitive eating story in a very compelling way. So big shouts to everybody who like took this seriously enough to do it.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me as a competitive eating fan to have this and to have, people who are adjacent to us in our lives of like, what, you guys do a competitive eating thing? Like, what? This is a really cool example and something that people can watch to, I think, appreciate why we do this and why this sport is kind of where it is. So I guess why don't we talk a little bit about the event first? Our experience. It was a lovely evening.
It's always it's a Fink Pizza stomach staple to go do a thing and be like, well, let's talk about
what we did.
Let's talk about when we were there. Big shouts to Jen from ESPN, which I love that it rhymes.
For hooking it up. Thank you so much, Jen.
Obviously, a Fink Pizza stomach. Thank you so much. I know you're listening. I know you're watching.
She's definitely listening and watching. So we showed up to what I would call the red carpet. It
was red and it was the carpet.
It was at a theater downtown as part of the Tribeca Film Festival. We happened to roll up at the same time that Joey, Crazy Legs, and Eater X were
That's absolutely right, which was just by happenstance, but so appreciated.
By happenstance. So as they were getting escorted to the red carpet, we were staying behind the press barricade.
But joke's on them. We got a wonderful Stella Artois.
We did, because it was the Stella Artois
served by the lovely sponsors and lovely folks at Stella. Thank you so much.
But it was fun. It was fun, like, seeing the eaters, these people who we've gotten to know personally, take a walk down the red carpet, and the few press outlets that were there, including the Tribeca kids, doing an interview.
Are they Tribeca specific kids?
Yes, it's like Tribeca kids.
That's delightful.
Yeah, so I believe OJ from Eat Feats either posted an article on Eat Feats or tweeted it out. We'll put the link up too.
And big shouts to those kids.
They did a delightful interview
really
with Kobe, Joey, Eater X, and Crazy Legs. So we just kind of hung out. It was interesting to see the different people that were there.
Yeah.
There were definitely people who were, I'm excited about competitive eating. This is really cool. There were other people who clearly just had passes to...
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to necessarily go overboard here, but I'd say there was like 4 people who were not in our world, who was not like us and Crazy Legs, who were excited about competitive eating. All 4 of them were sitting behind us.
Correct. I heard them being like, oh, do you know this like George Shea guy?
Right.
Like, what's going on here?
I'd say 98% of the people were either there because like they work for someone or had passes and figured they'd go. Yeah. But I think that's actually the most important part, because, I mean, I was sort of being annoying about it and saying like, oh, they should just listen to our first episode. They would have gotten all these answers, these questions answered. But they were shown this world and were immediately in. Like, there was somebody who was like, oh, like, do you throw up? Like, where does it go? Like, but, like, even that's kind of like an entree into it. And I appreciated so much that it was actually like 99.8% people who had no idea what was going on, because they got to see some humanity here. And also, like, just other people get to say something that, like, means something to us. Like, they're saying the words Joey Chestnut on not July 3, 4, or 5. And that's cool for me.
Now, the one question that I've gotten from multiple people is, Do you feel this is catered for more the competitive eating fan or the non-competitive eating
I would say
fan?
I mean, the competitive eating fan, again, is small in numbers, but...
What are you talking about?
I mean,
are you talking about the Fink Beat Stomach listeners or the...
no, the Fink Beat Stomach listeners, we far outrun our coverage there. But I'd say non. I mean, that was a story about 2 or 2.5, because I think George probably got half of the shine he could have. But 2.5 and their surrounding families, people, not necessarily eaters. I mean, what about you? What do you think?
It's definitely. I mean, and this is the smart thing to do. I feel definitely more mainstream.
Okay.
Definitely catered more to the mainstream, the non-competitive eating audience. They go into the history. They go into why this matters. They go into the pageantry, because the beginning, it's the first shot of the movie is George doing his MC intro.
They say that competitive eating,
the classic MC intro, him on the cherry picker. I believe it was last year's contest. That was where the footage was from.
Oh, was it? Oh,
I believe so. And at least a recent one. But he's up on the scissor lift, not the cherry picker, the scissor lift. And, it goes into George talking about, this is this ridiculous thing that we do. And, we had this belt. I was told it was made by Fabergé, but maybe it was made from some hardware store.
But they immediately that's actually a really good microcosm of that explains George without anything needing to be said, really.
So it really, sets it up. And
before we continue though, because I have a question that I'm interested. Only you could probably answer this, or at least between the two of us. What does a not mainstream version of that documentary look like? You obviously, I think you said it perfectly that that setup and the way they bring you in is absolutely perfect. But how does that get made with how does that get made for an audience that is competitive eating focused?
They could have bogged it down a lot more with more of the history, more of the other eaters and kind of the filling out. I mean, one of the reasons I love competitive eating wasn't really explored. It's the other characters. It's the people who aren't the top people but still dedicate themselves to going to these contests, having their own personality, still going even though they have no chance of eating as much as someone like Joey or Kobayashi.
So you're really talking more about the contest than the people.
Yes.
Than these
and
two guys.
And the circuit. And
right. Yeah, because they kind of do a circuit started, circuit got big, now we're in.
Exactly. Right. They and this was something that we talked about right after was they oscillated between, because 30 for 30s are generally moments in time, I believe is how you described it.
I'd say usually.
And, it's saying, okay, this is when Wayne Gretzky went to LA and blah. Obviously, this is focused on, the 2-3 years primarily of Joey versus Kobe on the stage. It goes into a little bit before, a little bit after, but then there are times where it does oscillate into the greater world to give more context.
And I actually think that they struck a really good balance of that. I personally think that if they went into the idea of here's Cookie Jarvis, then that's actually a different movie.
Correct.
And also for competitive eating people, that's information they already know. So I actually think that that's probably the only way you play it. Obviously, we think so much about this more than we think about this more than sort of anyone not named a Shay or probably Crazy Legs. But I don't know that you could have done more. I don't think you could have done less and really felt the impact. I really enjoyed, and I think something that was service to competitive eating people and to casual fans or muggles was the clips of ESPN coverage and ESPN old contests and the stuff that they did.
Crystal Square Off and the Pizzone, the Pizza Hut
Pizzone, and the when Kobe ate versus the Bear, that stuff no one knows about unless you were watching Fox when that happened. But excuse me, wow. But it really showed. I think it was probably a nice chuckle for people who were involved then. And I think a nice window into it for people who are not involved.
Because as a self-proclaimed competitive eating superfan
and journalist,
all of this stuff happened before we were covering the sport.
Years before.
I would, because there were years that Kate and I were going to the contest prior to us doing Fink Pizza Stomach. I've never seen Kobe eat at Coney Island,
right.
So we missed, arguably the golden age of competitive eating with things like the Alka-Seltzer Open, which is talked about in the documentary, the Crystal Square Off, all the other things. So some of that stuff I knew about. I've maybe seen some. I know the Pizzone, the Pizza Hut contest.
Yeah.
I had no idea that was a thing.
Right.
The whole Kobe versus the bear. I knew that was a thing, but had never seen the footage as extensively as I've seen the film.
That was probably double the footage you'd ever seen. So that was cool.
There was footage of Kobayashi in Japan on eating shows in Japan that obviously I had never seen.
Yeah.
So Nicole did a really good job of showing a lot of the archive footage, and she actually thanked people before the movie about getting all that footage. So they must have really worked to pull all that stuff, and they peppered it in the right way. Mm-hmm. The other, probably the best thing about the movie, for both sides of the aisle, of the super fan and the casual, is how humanized Joey and Kobayashi were. Yeah. And that's primarily done, in my opinion, through the interviews with their parents. Yep. And in one of the things, and I had this in my mind because one of the descriptions of the film mentioned this. Mm-hmm. So I already was it led the witness a little bit. But you realize that they're not that different in their...
Which is a perfect villain thing. Like, we're not so different, you and I.
Right, but then they're on opposite sides. Right. But, they both come from families where their parents, supported them, almost humble beginnings, people who were kind of putting themselves out there because they felt they had some sort of natural ability. Right. They were trying to have fun, and they wanted to be the best. And to see interviews, and extensive interviews from Kobayashi's father and Joey's parents was pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, and, I mean, I alluded to it in the beginning, but, how did you get into this question is one that we've asked 500 times. And one
and every other local journalist.
Right, and everyone asks. And you could answer it by the normal answer, and Joey and Kobe do and did that night, and will continue to do until, they're sort of done with this forever. But the real answer is what they got to with their families. And, that is only something you could do through this medium. That's only something that... you could do with sort of the right person and with the right director and with the right footage, but it all came together. And the real answer is not I signed up for a contest because my brother said. It's because these are my parents. And you could see when Joey's parents were talking that they were proud and that they had a certain sort of silliness between the two of them that you could almost see them being oh, it's gonna be so funny. I don't know if they call him this, but Joseph's gonna go down and do this thing. It's gonna be so fun, only because of X, Y, and Z. And Kobe talking about his mother was an absolute beautiful moment, and that's really the answer. But you can only do it with these types of documentaries, which is one, why they're fantastic, Absolutely. And two, why I think this one had a lot of really, really interesting moments.
And it was cool because Kobayashi's dad was talking about, growing up, I wanted to be, I don't know if he said actor or movie star, but he said something to that effect of basically I want to be in Hollywood. And, it didn't work out. So then I wanted to be a baseball player, and it didn't work out. So I told him that whatever you do, just try to be the best and be the best. So that, and he said it in a way so you can continue to do it. And Kobe, and then on the flip side, you have, I would almost say Joey's dad was a music teacher.
Yeah.
So they all have this performance aspect of it, and then but the other thing that I, as a fan of competitive eating, that was shocking and interesting and illuminating coming from this documentary is the training.
Well, that's what I was actually going to say is all of that comes down to what I think if you had all of our friends and family watch it, the one thing I think would come up the most is the training stuff. It's the great talk about footage.
And I don't want to, there's a clip for anyone watching on YouTube.
Which is phenomenal, this part of the Joey.
And thanks to ESPN, to Jen, for getting us these clips.
Yeah,
but,
big ups. Thank you.
This doesn't even necessarily show what we're talking about. So, Joey doing a speed run, you see that. But Joey, let me take a step back. One of the underlying themes is that Kobayashi is just really good, naturally good. But also part of the reason, and you see in his training, is he's about precision and perfection. And so he talks about, I'm going to, I dunk water. Part of my flow, and this clip's up here now, is dunking water. So I'm just going to practice that motion of dunking the water.
Also, while you're doing this, if you are watching on here, you see that they even set it up on a little tray. Like it looks
Black
like
background.
It looks like they're trying to like set him up to like make sushi. Like
yeah,
they even do it where like Joey's like, I'm the American, and we'll get into how Joey does it, and like I'm going to do this on like American will,
brute force,
and I'm going to do this in my way of like they set the archetypes without doing it too much. But when you talk about precision, and Kobe really does, even the way they shoot that precision is really well done.
He's precision and elegance, and again like perfection, and doing the same motion over and over and over again, and he's able to perfect those things because he just has this innate, ability in a sense that he's then able to perfect. Where Joey is definitely the hungry of the three, where he does it through hard training, over and over and over again from speed runs. But the shocking part was some of the exercises that he was doing, where you have to see the film, because honestly, one of the coolest part, one of the most interesting parts of the film, especially if you're a fan of competitive eating, the way I would describe it is essentially weightlifting with his mouth.
Yeah.
And the different breathing and swallowing and again like training his jaw and so on. It really hit home, or I really realized the gravity of being able to see that when we were walking with Crazy Legs to the after party.
Yeah.
And he literally just kind of, almost to himself, just being like, I never knew he did
which was
stuff
fun.
like that. Like that information, as far as we know, isn't really out there. It's not something he talks about in interviews. And he mentioned in the Q&A that was something that he doesn't talk about, but it's here in the film, which is pretty crazy.
Right, and as much as they are similar, and there's a lot to be said for them facing off and being sort of driven by the same stuff. I love that I love the way that they're different, and it's almost too perfect that they're precision and not to say that Kobe doesn't work, because obviously he works as hard as anybody, maybe just as hard as Joey, but their calling cards are different in the way that, like, as a sports fan and as a competitive eating co-journalist, you're the journalist, I'm the assistant to the regional journalist. That's exactly what I want. Like, that story and that type is exactly the type of foe that I want for each of them.
And Joey talks about this, and he's actually said this in interviews with us.
Yeah.
Where it became easier with Kobayashi because he was able to think about him as his nemesis. Mm-hmm. And there was this divide between the two of them, because from what it seemed, Kobayashi, I mean, he wasn't living in the U.S. at the time.
Right.
So he was flying in for the big contest, whether it be Nathan's or some of these like Crystal, or when they were doing the Glutton Bowl, like all these like big contests, because he was the best of the best. He was their spectacle. So to my impression, it wasn't talked about in the film, but my impression was they didn't have the same, hanging out before, during, and after the contest that you have a lot now.
Sure.
So Joey was able to think of him as just this rival, this enemy, this person he can't relate to, and just as, enemy number one that I have to beat, and that drove him. And Joey has since talked about that with Matt Stoney and Carmen and so on, where he doesn't have that same animosity, and it almost hurts his ability to push himself, because Joey is that hungry person. He needs to be motivated.
Right. Now, this to me brings us to what I believe in the notes, and what I believe.
We can take this wherever you want.
What I believe now is the only place to take it, in what I took from the film, which is that yes, 110%, Joey and Stoney were nemeses.
Joey and Kobe.
Sorry, now I got Stoney on the brain. Thank you. Joey and Kobe were nemeses, and they were both very young at this time.
Yes.
And you see some of what was coaxed out of them, and maybe what they convinced themselves into. It seems like maybe Joey more so than Kobe, at least in terms of the film, and we haven't talked to either of them about this, is sort of coaxed out to me by George Shea and Major League Eating.
Yes.
And that is where the film gets interesting, and this is actually now I'm thinking a beautiful part of filmmaking by the director, which is that, like, you don't really come away with an answer.
Correct.
But they do sort of they don't even hint. They show you a moment where, like, they're being fed lines about about, like, overstepping their bound. And Joey, to his credit, has said in the film, and I believe, based on everything we know about him, like, maybe doesn't regret some of it, but certainly has a softer spot in his heart now than when he was 22, 23 years old when he was doing this. That they were feeding him lines to sort of nudge Kobe, even though I don't necessarily know that he wanted to be that outwardly aggressive. So you sort of have Tinder, and George and Emily really were the flame that sort of lit it all, and maybe led to the downfall. I wouldn't necessarily call it a downfall, but to the disillusion of this relationship with Kobe sort of being the outcast.
Yes. And, George has come out publicly and said, I am the bad of the good, the bad, the hungry.
Which, if you've seen the film, doesn't need to be explained.
Correct. And, he, at the corn contest, he was actually saying, he mentioned during the contest, this is a 12-minute contest, this is a long contest.
Right.
He started talking about Joey and the hot dogs and so on, and then mentioned the film and mentioned the bad. He said, I'm the bad, I'm the poor man's Vince McMahon.
Everyone's the poor man's Vince McMahon.
Yeah. Any documentary paints a picture.
Right.
It's not to say it's accurate or not accurate or whatever, but it's painting a picture.
Right.
And again, the picture that's being painted is that George is this, like corporate, like they always say like the P.T. Barnum, the Carney, the PR guy, and the movie starts off with you see George being over the top, talking about where he literally says, he makes things up when he MCs, and we actually talked about that when we were at the Queens qualifier, where he said something that was wrong, that Badlands corrected him, and he literally said to the crowd, I just make this stuff up, like whatever, and he said, if you say it, it's true,
right?
And so
which we could have 3 more, and I'm glad if anyone wants to hashtag Fink Fan Forum. Tell us to do 2 or 3 more episodes on just this part of it. I would love to do that.
Because there's a whole...
I'll come here and we can do like 3 more episodes on just that.
But and right, wrong, or otherwise, that's how Major League Game was built. Before Kobayashi, well before Kobayashi.
We got the Rays.
Before the Rays game. And so that's George's MO. And you see... And so that is set up in the beginning, and then you see in the film, again, Joey saying a line in an interview that MLE is clearly helping produce, and you hear George in the back say, no, say that again, but say it with this. Or say, I can't remember the exact quote. And it's unfortunate because, again, it's a lot of things happened at that time.
Yeah.
Where, Kobayashi's mother passed away.
Right. And again, thinking about Kobe and his mother and Joey them both being so young changes how I felt about all of this.
Of course.
So there's them being so young. I'm sorry that I cut you off,
No.
They have every right as MLE to say like, well, let's do this interview. Let's I'll coach you through it. You're like blah blah blah. So they have every right to do that. Thinking about them in being so young and being so new, especially Kobe being in a new country in a language he doesn't speak. Joey being 22, 23 years old, getting fame, unless he was completely lying, making $100,000 off of competitive eating when I'm sure he was making 30 the year before doing whatever he was doing at 22 years old. They were easy to manipulate. I won't say that George did manipulate them. They're easy to manipulate.
Influence.
Right. Sure.
You're splitting words, but manipulate, I feel, is the right.
It just sounds pejorative. And I don't know that I can say from the film that George manipulated them. And I don't know enough about their relationship to suggest that he did. But
there's no denying he was trying to build a story.
110%. And the world in which those 2 kids were in they were the perfect canvas for George to paint on.
Yeah. And the unfortunate thing, in my opinion, that comes out of all of that is it ended, unfortunately, leading to this xenophobic crowd reaction and
also so interesting.
Yeah, so there's negativity, which, again, something we talked about because we even saw it when Kobayashi wasn't even on the stage at our first Coney Island. And all of that was obviously, in my opinion, not part of Major League Gaming's intent.
No.
But it was, again, like George says, like you need a story. And it starts off right in the beginning with Gersh saying, in order to build a sport, you have to have a story.
Right.
And so that's what they did year after year. And the story that's so compelling to so many people is this all-American hero coming back and taking back the honor of winning this hot dog contest on America's birthday and yada yada and so
and also what they didn't address, and they definitely should not have in the film, which these were the years after 9/11, which you cannot discount being in New York City on the 4th of July in 2002, 2003, 2004, what that was like in general. Let's keep even though obviously any sort of xenophobia or anti-whatever at that time was as unacceptable as it is now. It was a real part of life.
Yes. So it was almost this perfect, not perfect, so almost a series of unfortunate events.
Yes.
That are highlighted in the film.
Right.
And that's where sort of the bad comes in. And, George says, and agree with him or not, and I feel the film kind of leads you to be like, this is what a negative statement, where George kind of says, I helped build up Kobayashi. I helped build, and he said if he came back tomorrow, I would say he's returned and he's here and he's here for you.
This is what I can do 4 or 5 episodes on. That 40 seconds of George dialogue or monologue, dialogue talking, is what I think we can actually talk a lot about. And so I won't go through it deeply, but I'll just sort of tee these ideas up and see what you think, which is that they start the film saying basically everything George says on camera should be questioned and is tongue in cheek.
Yes, absolutely. He says it himself.
His maybe last part of the film is... I have
to watch it again, but yeah.
Oh, no one's bigged him up more than I could. I would tell him X, Y, and Z. Meanwhile, the whole part, his whole existence in the film is he should not be trusted with anything he says to you. But his only response is, I have done X on stage, which is already proven by himself to say, don't trust it. And as from filmmaking and being able to add it into the other stuff, they've sort of made you not trust him at all. So that part becomes super interesting. Talking about things being sort of truthiness has been super interesting in the age of and not to put George as an equal to, but in the age of Trump and the truthiness in general has taken a whole different look. And all of that comes to bear in a split second at the end in that one scene with George.
And I feel, and he said it on a podcast interview prior to the Miami qualifier. It was a local station in Miami, and he said, you look back, you see he jokes, but I personally think, I don't know George that well,
sure,
but I really think it's coming from a place of he's kind of ugh, and he literally says. You see things in the film that go, ugh, I wish I didn't say that.
Right.
And I bet it was that.
110%.
That would be my guess. I don't know.
Right. Because we know enough people who respect and care for George.
Yeah.
I don't, again, we don't know him. So that's almost
respect George, but don't, honestly,
right.
We know him basically as well as the other fans know.
Right.
We've had some, we've talked to him a little bit better. We've talked to him, but it's not like we're sitting down having, brunch with him.
No, but that's actually the tough part. Is that
if you ever want to do your brunch.
Right. That's actually the tough part. Is that to see somebody just cast as a half villain.
Literally the bad.
But they don't even really
they don't label it that way, but it's
and they don't necessarily give you enough to they don't go hard on it.
Correct. Correct.
But that's actually the interesting part is that we know enough people who love and respect him. We know enough about the story, but he kind of dug his own grave in that movie, and that is maybe why I really enjoyed it. Is that we got to go how do I feel about George? What do I think about George in this? Or if you don't know George, what do I think about this guy in this world? And maybe that was the right choice to kind of not go too far in one way or the other.
What I appreciated, or one of the things that I took away from the George parts of the movie is, the film, is that...
Is this a film?
It's at the film festival. So can it be, it has to be.
All right, can we... No, we can't get into the film.
We'll get into that later. That's a whole nother episode.
I'll do an episode on what is the difference between a flick, a film, and a movie.
George, obviously charismatic, personable, but I always, and I'm always almost impressed. It feels like he's always performing, and not in a disingenuous way, but just that he always has this George Shea.
Well, we've only ever seen him at work. Let's not forget.
Correct. That's what I mean. So I don't know the real George Shea in a sense.
Right.
But the one thing that I really appreciate, and it was reinforced in the film, is how he looks at the business of competitive eating.
Okay.
And as a fan of competitive eating, seeing all the negativity out there with the contract and the this and the all the negative stuff that is going to get exacerbated probably by this film, and other films before it, is George has been consistent and clear on how Major League Eating and the hot dog eating contest is a PR event. And it's about building up a story and building up a spectacle. And it's like they say, he's P.T. Barnum in now 2019.
Right.
And it's not about facts. It's not about...
But see, I don't think that's a... You said you appreciate it. I don't think that's a positive at all.
Positive or not, I think I appreciate the consistency. I don't feel he backs down from he doesn't shy. Clearly, he doesn't shy away from that.
No, but I also don't think
this wasn't quotes taken out of context. It was interviews for the film talking about this, where he said X, Y, Z.
But I also don't think he explains it to my liking as to why they did what they did and why they did it to the one person who put them on the map. Like what he said was consistent and has been their talking point forever. But I don't think he made me feel good enough about his reasoning. I actually think that and when he says he'd welcome Kobe back and no one's bigged him up as much as he has, meanwhile, that's a whole different thing, is to me what leaves some to be desired.
Can you be more
Sure. So he basically says, like, how could I not make your competitive eating be only with Major League Eating competitive eating events in America? I mean, what was his rationale for why? I feel like I gave a better rationale on this show, and I'm anti-contract.
Well, I feel like they almost don't even go. I feel
maybe
like
they cut it.
They shy away from the contract. I feel like it's discussed, and it's essentially explained. From what I remember, it's explained as just, well, this started to get big, and we wanted to, basically get control of our eaters because they were basically able to do whatever they wanted. So, we kind of wrangled them up. And you can look at this. Some people think this is just an excuse, but I view it as the logic of saying, okay, you have people representing the company of Major League Eating, the league of Major League Eating, and they go to these events and they do whatever. And then if not even the face of the company, but someone within the ranks, then all of a sudden, I feel like they did talk about, it's like, oh, what if they get like a DUI or something? Was that in the movie?
I don't think so.
Must have been in that interview I'm thinking of.
But also, if you're not paying my bills, though, that's ultimately you do that because you play in the NBA. Like, if you play in the NBA, you can't go off and play pickup as Mike Sullivan Inc. But dog, you're paying me $500 for a contest.
I win.
If you win.
I win.
And George did make one really great point, which is that you can go off and do whatever you'd like. But not, his main point to me while I was watching it is, you can do whatever you'd like, but not if you want us to put you on the big stage.
Yes.
And to me, they got lucky that they had a Joey. If they did that with Kobayashi, and even a Carmen level talent came along, or a Carmine, if you will, or a Carmen Cincati, whatever you want to call him. He goes by many nicknames, which obviously we have a ton of experience with. If they didn't have a Joey, that would have blown up right in their face. And
Joey says it towards the end of the film, I have to thank Kobe. Right. I got to thank Kobe. Because without what he did and the pushback and so on, and that whole spectacle and him actually leaving, it gives Joey the courage to say, all right, well, I'm going to do that too.
Right.
And I'm going to leave unless you change this, and this.
And they can't strike lightning twice.
Right. Clearly, there's so much more that we can talk about. And like James said, we would love to hear from you guys about what are the things that we should get more into. #FinkFanForum. Let us know. But kind of trying to rein this back and tie this up in a bow. The film is great. The film is great. It's thought-provoking from our standpoint as people who have followed the sport of competitive eating for a few years pretty closely. But I'm also excited for my non-competitive eating friends to see this and enjoy it. And, it's enjoyable at the surface, and clearly it's thought-provoking underneath.
And we'll have to find out when it's going to be on, and we'll tell you guys to watch 2nd. It. And, July 2nd confirmed.
Is what I've been seeing everywhere.
We'll keep up on it to remind you when it's coming and all the rest.
Absolutely. So we may have some more coverage of this coming up, maybe some interviews. We got to work on
that. Yeah, and also, again, hit us up on #FinkFanForum if you do want to hear more about something we talked about, or have something that we started to talk about and dropped, or to tell us that like the 45 minutes on George and Emily, or that like the 4th of July is actually the most important thing that's ever happened. Tell us all of that stuff. Hashtag Fink Fan Forum.
And the best place to send that hashtag is, of course, to go to twitter.com/FBTSpod. Also Instagram, also FBTSpod.
And YouTube is just Fink Beats the Stomach.
Our YouTube channel is Fink Beats the Stomach.
Check it out up here.
It's been going over here. And if 280 characters just aren't enough, because sending something through Instagram, that's a little weird, so there's no character limit there.
Don't slide in there.
You can send us an email. It's an electronic snail mail, and you can do that by sending it to finkbeatsthestomach@gmail.com.
James,
we talked about a lot of... I'm like so wiped right now, but
I believe vids.
We literally talked about a moving picture.
That was vids, and film vids.
There's a lot of still pictures. And I feel like a few times, especially from the corn contest, other places on the internet we want to visit.
Yeah, URLs.
If only there was some place that aggregated all of that we can go there.
The God, Mark Zuckerberg gave us one gift and one gift only. It's facebook.com and it's /FinkBeatsTheStomach. Check that out.
That is correct. I don't know what else. I think that's it.
Yeah, we went over our hour. For everyone who's still with us, for everyone who's been listening to Fink Beats the Stomach, for everyone who came to the screening and enjoyed it, to ESPN, and to obviously to Joey and Kobe. Big shouts. Big shouts to Haji Beats, to Sid the Dude.
Crazy Legs and Tim, well done as well. You guys got featured. It was fun seeing you guys.
And Badlands, we missed you if you're still watching.
Yeah,
Where were you?
Where were you, man? Where were you?
Oh, well, we'll have to catch him soon.
But most importantly, we want to thank you guys for listening or watching to this episode of Fink Beats the Stomach.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.